Good day, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Sports Inquirer Show. This is E. Marcel Pertut. Hope it all is well with you out there. We're recording this on April 22nd, 2020. Man, we haven't done a show in over a week. There's been a lot of activity going on in the world of sports, and we'll touch on all of those from the NFL, the draft coming up in the next day or two, Chicago Bulls documentary on The Last Dance. I have thoughts on that. Also, we'll do a spin around the rest of the professional and collegiate sports world as things have been changing and evolving with the coronavirus and dealing with everything with that. Oh, but as always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, head to the mothership, the sportsinquirer.net, premier site for news and notes in the world of sports. You can also head to our Twitter and Instagram pages. They are under the word Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. Just make sure you do a search on there, see our site, or see our pages there, and you can follow everything that we're doing. Also head to Facebook. We have two pages on there. Both of them, the first one is The Sports Inquirer. The second one is Sports Inquirer. So either one of those will be a great way to check out everything that we're doing. And then finally, subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud under The Sports Inquirer. And that's how you get our archives of our past shows from the Sports Inquirer Show, the one that you're listening to right now. It's a Verbal Submission, which is our mixed martial arts and professional wrestling podcast. And we also have our interviews and pressers in the Southeast, particularly in the state of Georgia. So you go to those pages or go to our site and you'll get an update on everything that we're doing on there. I'll start with just the general things going on in the world of sports since our last show in relation to coronavirus. Really not much to give an update on. Obviously, we still know that the NBA and the NHL seasons and MLS, Major League Soccer, seasons that were active at the time of the current state of things right now, those seasons have still been postponed. We've not had an NBA, MLS contest or NHL really since March. And we are still in a delay with that. We're hearing different theories from them trying to play on neutral sites to playing in empty arenas. And Anthony Fauci, who, if you follow the news at all, he's one of President Trump's main advisors as far as the coronavirus goes. He has stated that there's potential for games to return if they're played in empty arenas. And I can see that option. My only problem not problem, but the only issue I see with that is travel. And I know a lot of these teams, they travel by charter. So you figure that helps out a little bit. They're not like the majority of us that travel by commercial and everything like that. So they do control when they fly and they have a lot more control over the conditions as far as making sure the plane is clean and things along those lines. But I still think that's going to be the biggest issue. And there was a news with the state of Florida declaring World Wrestling Entertainment an essential business. And I may delve into that a little bit further in another show. But what that really means is that since World Wrestling Entertainment is a nationally telecasted show, they have, well, if you're not familiar with wrestling, they have three shows now that are on cable networks. Two of them are in USA, and they have a show called Raw on Monday nights, NXT on Wednesday nights, and SmackDown, which is on Fox, on Friday nights. So they do a show. It's a TV broadcast, and they film out of Florida. They've been filming out of Florida the past month and a half. That's where one of their corporate bases are, in Orlando and in Tampa. So the Florida governor announced that the WWE, since they are nationally broadcast on those cable and broadcast platforms, it is an essential business. Therefore, they're allowed to do live shows. So what that means is that they have been able to record their shows on a weekly basis. They recorded a show on Monday night. Tonight, where this is actually on a Wednesday, when they do NXT on USA, they'll be able to do a normal show like they typically do. Now, they have been in empty arenas in their performance center. It's a building that they own. It's not a public building. And they're able to operate their broadcast from there. And there are ties to Vince McMahon, the owner of the World Wrestling Entertainment, and the Florida governor and President Trump. Their political ties there. And if you want to do the searches for that, it's pretty easy to figure out. But what that means in relation to us having live sporting events again is that you're starting to see states. It's not going to be the first, since Florida's not going to be the only state that does this. Just here in the state of Georgia, record out of Georgia, our governor has announced that businesses are starting to open up as early as April 24th, as a recording of this show. So gyms and barbershops, tattoo parlors, things like that can be opened up. Now you don't have to go, and businesses they don't have to open up themselves, but they're allowing that option. When I say with the travel, you look at it from that perspective, while Florida may have this go okay, in Georgia, there are professional teams in a majority of the states, from California to New York and everywhere in between. So do you start having all the games in the state of Florida or in Georgia or Nevada, which is very prominent with the combat sports, with mixed martial arts and boxing? Do you have all the events there? So I think that you're starting to see maybe some things soften up in that regard. But what you're looking at, though, is a potential of that happening, or in that type of situation where you will see professional sports. And I'm not saying collegiate sports are done for the spring, so we're not talking about that right now. The next collegiate sport you will see is football in the fall, and some other sports that, and like volleyball, that take place starting in late August, early September. But I think what you're going to see is, as far as maybe baseball, there may be an option to play in the state of Florida and maybe Arizona. We've seen that plan being discussed because they have the facilities from spring training. All the teams are there. Half the major league teams are in Arizona. Half the major league teams are in Florida. We've seen Florida. We've broken that down. Maybe Arizona becomes a team next to do that. We'll see as far as that goes. But I think if you can handle the travel issues, as far as the players and the coaches and the staffs going from one place to another, that's where you'll probably see some games take place. And as they're recording this on April 22nd, I think in June you could possibly see some games taking place. As far as the NBA and the NHL, they had about 15 regular season games left in their season. I think you want to give everybody a chance to have 4 or 5 regular season games, even the teams that aren't going to be in the postseason, an opportunity to play. I think you see that. And also give the postseason teams a chance to ramp up their form to be ready to go as far as the playoffs go. Major League Baseball, I could see them starting in June as well, or or mid to late June, with the empty arena or empty stadium option. I just think the finances of it, not even the political side, which could be a whole nother conversation, but the financial aspect of it, you say with the empty stadiums, people aren't going to go, and that's fine. But there are still TV contracts. As I mentioned, with the Florida making WWE an essential business, that was based strictly on television and those contracts. And baseball and NBA, even Major League Soccer, all have multi-million-dollar contracts. If you go to the NBA and some of the other bigger professional leagues, close to $1 billion in television contracts. And you can only see so many replays of Lakers Celtics from the finals in the 2000s. I joke about that because ESPN is replaying it once again. If I have to see Paul Pierce win another championship with the Celtics over Kobe Bryant, it's annoying. They're showing all of these games over and over again. And that's why The Last Dance, which we'll get to later, the documentary on the Bulls, got so much reception because it was new, it was different. There are only so many replays of NASCAR events or NHL Stanley Cup Finals, where we want to see some sporting events. And I think at first You saw fans didn't want sports to come back until they can go to them, and that's preference, and that's what we all would like to see. We all want to go to our ball games, but I think fans and sports media as well, all of us involved, we want to cover live sporting events, even if we're sitting at home and we're not even able to attend the game. We still just want to report on live wins and losses. There's only so many retrospectives. I've really stopped listening. I still listen to a few of the. Well, I like to listen to local and national shows, but there are only so many breakdowns of the Mount Rushmores of respective sports, or the top 5 teams in the history of the sport, or who would you choose between player A and player B. That gets annoying and monotonous. I don't even like to do that. And I'm a sports historian. I love the history of sports, but it's perspectives are good, but not every single day. So that's where I think you can start seeing a turn or a push towards having the live sporting events in that regard. But we do have some news that'll be coming up in the next 3 or 4 days with the NFL in 2 ways. One, we have the draft coming up starting on April 23rd. I will say this as far as the draft, the quarterbacks are always the intriguing ones. We all know Joe Burrow probably go #1 in Cincinnati, but Tua, Herbert, and Love, the other 3 quarterbacks, where they land in the first round will be intriguing. We have the Dolphins at the 5th overall pick. Will they choose Tua or Tagovailoa or Justin Herbert? Maybe they go with Love out of Utah State. There's so many smokescreens out there. You have the Chargers that are the 7th pick. Do they go at quarterback? Tyrod Taylor's a solid quarterback. He's led a team to the playoffs. But if you're the Chargers, you got new uniforms. You're opening up your new stadium in Los Angeles. You want a marquee name to go in there with a quarterback, and that's where you're going to see that happen. So you're just looking at all these things taking place. Where the quarterbacks land will kind of dictate the rest of the round. And as far as the trade speculations go, you can't trust anything, or you shouldn't trust anything that you're listening to or hearing right now. In a normal scenario, there's so many smokescreens and so many theories thrown out there. You have teams that love a player but will float out rumors that they don't like them, whether they didn't do well in Wonder League test, or they have a bad attitude, or maybe they have an injury that we don't know about, and leaking it to the local media or the national media correspondents at your Fox News, your ESPNs, your NBCs, all of that stuff. That's normal. But now, without the majority of the pro days that are able to take place, without the scout interactions, we had the combine. There's more secrecy with what you're hearing as far as what teams are doing. So I would not take the trust, or I wouldn't trust too much all of the sources that you are hearing as far as that goes. But also with the news in the NFL, Rob Gronkowski traded to the Tampa Buccaneers for the Patriots get a 4th-round pick, and the Buccaneers get Gronkowski in a 7th-round pick. Obviously, Gronkowski retired 2 years ago. He sat out last season. He is now back, and the main reason he's going to Tampa is obviously Tom Brady is also with the Bucs. They reunite in Tampa. I look at it from the Patriots' perspective first. Gronkowski was not going to go back to New England. They still owned his rights as a player. Had him under contract. So you get a 4th rounder for him that you can work with. That's a solid move. Yeah, he has 1 year and $10 million left on his contract. So he wasn't going to go back to New England. I think he was tired of playing under that. He won 3 championships with them. So I shouldn't say he was tired of it, but he's moved on. He sat out a year. And going back to New England without Tom Brady, going to a questionable quarterback situation, I think he would not come back to New England. He may have came back to some other teams, but this really showed that he was going to come back wherever Tom Brady went. Now, if Brady stayed with New England, would he have gone back to the Patriots? That would have been interesting because I don't know if you want to be in that scenario under that New England regime. But he goes to Tampa, where Tom Brady is, and we look at the Bucs. Very smart move. You have Tom Brady for 2 years at the most. You got to be all in with it, and to have a Hall of Fame tight end who, if he is healthy, and we'll get to the health part in a minute, if he's healthy and in shape and can get back into form, as I said, you have a Hall of Fame tight end as a top target for Tom Brady. You don't turn that down, even if it's a fourth round pick. You're all right there. That is definitely a smart move. I think what helps the move is that also he's in Tampa, warm weather, playing on grass. That's going to really help with his conditioning and with his health. You're going to play at least 10 games in very warm conditions, possibly 11, because you have your 8 home games in Tampa, plus you play in the Dome in New Orleans and Atlanta. In Carolina, it could be hot or cold, but majority of the time it should be relatively fair weather, much better than New England. And that helps when you're an older player. We say Gronkowski, I think he's 29 or 30. He's an old 29 or 30. He's dealt with injuries in history. We're going to talk about the injuries. He's struggled to play complete seasons often in his career. Just the physicality of his play, and he's talked about it. He's dealt with head injuries. We always see he's dealt with every part of his body has been hurt. Just the way he plays. Now he sat out a year. We've seen his body. He's leaned up quite a bit. Now we know he's been doing he endorses the CDC or CBC, the medicine in that regard. I don't know. That's the marijuana based medicine. He's probably not going to be able to do that as much with the testing in the NFL. How he adjusts to that, I don't know. He'll probably gain some weight, so we'll see how his body responds to it. But overall, if you're the Pats or if you're the Patriots and he's not come back to your organization, you make that move. And if you're the Buccaneers and you have a chance to acquire a player of that caliber, you make that move. Does this make the Buccaneers a Super Bowl favorite? I don't think so, but it obviously makes them very intriguing in the NFC South. We'll see how the draft lays out and some other free agency moves. But you do have to look at the Buccaneers as a playoff caliber team, especially with the extra playoff team in the rotation this year. But that was a very interesting move for them. And then since talking about the Patriots and Tom Brady and the Bucs, I heard the Howard Stern interview. I really didn't learn too much as far as on the field. He did talk about his wife and their struggles. Well, or not say struggles, but the change in their marriage throughout his time with the Patriots. That's intriguing for the gossip columns and all of that stuff. I just think at the end, he wanted to make a change. He spent 20 years with the Patriots organization, had a great time there. He did more than you possibly can expect that any other player in that situation. Won 6 Super Bowls, played in 9. I mean, what more can you expect or want from your tenure of your quarterback? So he decides to move on to Tampa, and I think he's just in a different place. And I think we learned that from the Howard Stern interview. And I said Stern did a good job, got into some of the personal stuff, and got beyond the general Tom Brady talk that we always hear. But as far as relating to the sports side, and that's what we talk about, I didn't learn too much as far as something new or different. And that interview was more about his lifestyle and what he's doing. So I just want to touch on that as far as that goes. And yes, I did watch the Last Dance documentary, the first 2 parts of the 10-part series about the Chicago Bulls. That's on ESPN. As I said, this one's interesting in a way too because I was fortunate enough I'm old enough to remember the Bulls and when they played. As I was born in 1981, so my first year of really following sports in that regard and remembering things is probably 1989. I would say 1990, the finals between the Portland Trailblazers and the Detroit Pistons was the first NBA final that I actually remember watching and acknowledging that sports existed in that way and remembering things. So I saw Jordan I've seen all of his championships and all the great moments that we can go down the line and everything like that. What I didn't know about was really, and I mean, I've read things and I've seen stuff on the Bulls, was the acrimony between the front office and tension between the front office and the players. Front office, Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the Bulls, and Jerry Krause, the general manager, and the players, specifically Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, and I'll say Phil Jackson as well. I'll throw him in with the players in this scenario. The handling of Michael Jordan's foot injury in his second year, I was surprised. I mean, I knew that his foot was injured and that he missed out the good part of the regular season and they came back for the playoffs and faced the Celtics, gave him 63 points, still a playoff record in the first round of that playoffs. And I said, if you saw the series, I don't have to break down all that stuff. But I didn't realize that he came back in the regular season and they put him on a 14-minute time restriction, 7 minutes per half. And that was surprising that they had so much tension between Reinsdorf, Krause, and Jordan. And that really started the acrimony between them. How they wanted Jordan. Really, they didn't. If they had their preference, he wouldn't have come back, and they would have finished with a lottery pick and maybe gotten another high caliber player. And then also they didn't want to ruin their asset because there was a 10% chance, that's what the doctor was saying, that he could injure his foot again and permanently damage it and alter his career in a major way. But obviously Michael Jordan, we know how he is. He wanted to come back as soon as possible, was training in North Carolina without telling the Bulls and everything like that. So seeing the origins of that tension was interesting. I also knew about Scottie Pippen and his contract and how he signed it in the early 90s, a 7-year deal. And at the time, it was a respectable deal, but obviously Pippen outplayed it and became a Hall of Famer. And he was never able to renegotiate that contract. And we kind of knew about that tension and the trade rumors that always went on with the Bulls. And we all knew that was usually related to Pippen and his contract. Just hearing Reinsdorf talk about not wanting to renegotiate and saying, no, I told him not to sign it and all this stuff, I thought that was very petty on the Bulls side of things. And then I've heard the story and I've heard the perspectives of people saying that, well, Pippen signed the contract. He knew he was getting into. Man, like there's a common ground to work with it. And on Pippen's side of things, signing a 7-year, and that's where his representation, or Pippen himself, that was a bad deal by him. And that's why you'll never see, well, I should say never, but you'll hardly ever see a 7-year contract again in any sport, unless it's baseball and hockey kind of have those, but in basketball, especially with the way that the money changes as far as salary caps and availability of financial resources, you'll never see a 7-year. I keep saying never, but you most likely will not see a 7-year contract again. Pippen should have signed a 3-4 year deal and then gone back to the table. I know he said he had dealt with a back injury that could have potentially not end his career, but altered it in a strong way. But still, when you sign that type of deal, I was very surprised by that. And Krause, who looks like a really bad guy in that regard, and just in general, just his lack of respect for the players, saying organizations win championships and just not being very personal. It's tough and it's hard on Krause because he's passed away, so he can't defend himself in this documentary or in general. But the man did, outside of Jordan was drafted by Rob Thorne in the previous ownership. So outside of that, though, he drafted Pippen. He hired Phil Jackson. He drafted Tony Kukoc. He signed Dennis Rodman and Steve Kerr, and Luke Longley and B.J. Armstrong, all those guys. He brought all those guys, and Horace Grant. He brought all those guys into the Bulls organization. And he's a Hall of Famer executive for a reason, and deservedly so. But just his people skills and his interactions were not the strongest. So it was just very interesting seeing how he dealt with that. And finally, them breaking up the dynasty, wanting to break it up, I didn't understand that at all. So after they won they won their 5th championship in the Bulls regime, heading into the 98 season, they signed Jordan to a 1-year deal. They signed just a lot of people to 1 year deals in general. Scott with Phil Jackson, 1 year, $6 million, and then saying this is his last contract. They're breaking up the team. I didn't understand that at all because the rebuild was going to happen eventually. You weren't all those guys they're over 30. You're going to have to break the team up eventually. You ride that until the wheels fall off, and if it happens in the year 2001 or 2002, and you still have one or two more championships, that's fine. Why are you rushing to break the breakup? And the open flirtation with Tim Floyd, the head coach at Iowa State at the time collegiately, and Krause wanting to rebuild the team and put a rush on that. I was very surprised by that because eventually you're going to have to do that because Jordan and Pippen can't play forever. We all know that. Phil Jackson can't coach forever. You have to ride that out until the very, very end. So to preemptively make that breakup, I was surprised in that regard how open they were to making that happen. I knew kind of the tensions that took place with the teams and the player as far as the front office and the players, but the degree of that tension was surprising in that regard. And it's only 2 parts. We still have 8 more to go. So I'm looking forward to the Rodman years. We all know Dennis Rodman was an interesting character. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. Looking forward to hearing even little things like Horace Grant, him leaving to go to Orlando. And that was an interesting move at the time. Scottie Pippen, when his malcontention when Jordan retired the first time, culminating with him not going into the game in the playoff contest against the Knicks, not because the final play wasn't drawn up for him. Tony Kukoc went in, made the game-winning shot. Hear more of the backstory with that. And, just the Olympics with the Dream Team and them finally winning their first championship. So there's a lot more to go into the Bulls and dealing with the Detroit, the Pistons, the Bad Boys, and their struggles overcoming them and eventually doing that. So there's a lot more to break down with the documentary and everything that goes on there. So I'm very intrigued by that, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of that. Really not much more else for us to talk about. I just discussed the WWE and what they're doing, and so we touched on that. In Major League Baseball, as I mentioned, all options are open. The good part about, well, not good, but what helps the Major League Baseball is they haven't started their season yet. There isn't a desire, compared to the winter sports, to finish off their campaigns and get a postseason in. So the Major League Baseball can start their season June, July, even August. I don't think they'll go that far, but you get what I'm saying, that they can find a way to start their season a little bit later than most. So I said all options are open there. Just the biggest thing with a lot of these teams, and we'll conclude on this, and it ties into all of the sports. As I said, we can't just we're recording this on the 22nd of April. You can't just say May 1st we're playing games. One, logistically, we're dealing with political stuff as far as just availability of things. But then also, these teams are going to need probably up to a month. Maybe NHL and NBA can use about 2 weeks, and that's being very generous. And Major League Soccer, as far as getting back into shape, because all these guys are out of shape as far as playing. One, they are dealing with the health issues that we're all dealing with. They're human just like us, so they can't train or do their normal things. And I know they have some guys may have local facilities that they can maybe go into. Some of them have been busted for that. We've seen Dak Prescott trying to do drills with his receivers, even Tom Brady, and they've been reprimanded for that. I know some basketball guys may have home gyms to get shots in and all that stuff, but it's like, why are you going to do all of that when you don't know if the season's going to come back? So there are potentials for that, but you can do all of that, but you cannot get into game shape and playing shape until you're actually in those type of conditions and scenarios. So that's where these guys are going to need at least 2 weeks, and in baseball even more, especially for the pitcher side. Those guys are going to need to warm their arms up So they'll need maybe even about a month of spring training just to get back into playing shape. So that's where you have to look at the calendar and evaluate what's going on there when you look at these projections and the numbers and all of that stuff. But as I've said from the very beginning, it's a fluid situation as far as everything goes on there. But we do have some new news that's going to come up in our next show, which we're going to record on April 24th. We'll be able to recap the NFL draft, at least the first round, because there'll be some news there. Maybe we'll get some updates on some other leagues that are trying to get back up and starting. We'll also talk about, I have been watching a lot of Netflix and a lot of other shows. I've been promising a section of what I'm watching. I will finally do that. So I've been watching a lot of those shows. So we have still some things going on. And personally, just going through it, just living. And hope all of you are healthy and safe out there, and your family members are good, and your friends and colleagues and all that stuff. Yeah, so we'll just grinding it out and making it through. And as always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, head to the mothership, thesportsinquirer.net. You also go to our YouTube and SoundCloud page under the Sports Inquirer. Check that out. And social media-wise, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, you go to Sports Inquirer or the Sports Inquirer. You can do that and check out everything that we're doing and communicate with us. And we look forward to hearing back from you. Until later, good fight, good night, and be safe.